Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Nick. I'm one of the product designers at Mamas and Papas. We are a Yorkshire-based nursery brand. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we're based in Huddersfield, right in the heart of West Yorkshire, I guess. So yeah, just a little bit of background on the company. So we were formed in 1981 by some parents, Louisa and David Scacchetti. They were quite dismayed at the kind of standard or state of the kind of nursery industry when they had their little daughter. So they decided to do something about it and form a company with the aim of kind of providing quality products for their new family, but also other families across the country. So that's what they kind of formed the business around, that objective. Being Italian, they had a kind of natural desire to want to make things kind of quality, stylish, and have a degree of kind of an innovative feel to them. In terms of how it's going now, so what is it, 43 years later, we've got a number of award-winning products in our kind of back catalogue. We've touched the lives of millions of families. We've got 57 stores across the UK and we're active internationally as well. And I think the team size is somewhere above 900. Obviously, it kind of flexes quite a lot because we've got quite a lot of staff. And the way that we operate as a retailer is we don't just sell our own brand products. We have kind of a mixed channel model. So we sell products from other brands. Depending on the channel, that balance varies. So, for example, our clothing is all 100% Mamas and Papas. But in the travel sector, for example, pushchairs, it might be 30 to 40% Mamas and Papas. And the reason for that is because other brands might be doing a product that does something different to ours, and we want to make sure that we're catering to as many different user needs as possible and as diverse a range of users as possible. Obviously, if we stuck to just our own brand stuff, that would give us a shorter time to try and accommodate those needs as we see them, and that's quite difficult to do. So all of our own brand hard goods are developed in-house by the new product development team. So that's the team that I sit within, and we cover quite a lot of different expertise, not always personally individually. So I don't stretch across all of these things, but we have colleagues within NPD that do have the expertise in these areas. So for example, where I kind of operate is from the start in terms of research and design and stretching a little bit into the engineering side of things. But we also have teams that handle the safety, compliance, integrity side of design and also project management. The safety aspect, keeps us relatively unique. I think on our head office site in Huddersfield, we've got a UCAS accredited test lab. So I don't know if anyone saw Terry's post a couple of weeks ago, but one of the things he saw when he visited was the test lab with our rolling road where we put pushchairs through the paces, so they get pushed along for 500 miles to make sure that they can stand the test of time when they go into the real world. We've got various different terrains that we can run them across. We've got lots of cool, interesting kind of wobble board sort of things. It's a bit like the Q labs on James Bond where things are just kind of getting tipped over and vibrated and freezers and things like that. So yeah, really kind of interesting place to go, but also just an awesome set of expertise to be able to consult during the design development process to understand what's possible, but also maybe navigate around or through to make sure that the product's still safe but doing something unique perhaps. So NPD within the business is seen as a profit engine. So being able to design and develop class leading products is seen as a valuable component within our business. But there's a balance there. It takes higher investment to do that than other models, but maybe the rewards are higher. And I guess what that looks like in terms of some examples is, staffing and resourcing is obviously a challenge when you have to maintain an in-house team, bringing great people in, but also maintaining and growing that team. but then also resourcing it across the different projects that you might want to work on. Turnaround time for projects can be a little bit longer because we're going right back to kind of ground zero, if you like, trying to identify the gaps in the market. This, I guess, is as opposed to a model where we might work with an original equipment manufacturer who already has a product up and running, and we put our logo on it. We don't like doing that. We want the insight to come from us and the design and development to come from us and have control over all of it. So as you can see, as we look on the right hand side and some of those benefits, we have better control over the process. We get greater consistency. We can have products that really align with our values, but also fundamentally we get higher margins from doing it that way as well. We're also collaborators though, so we don't just work in isolation. We partner with lots of different stakeholders within the business. As I said, we've got the test lab on site, but we also have all the different business factions of the company under one roof. So it's really amazing to just go and spend a day with customer care and learn all the things that the customers are talking to them about at that moment in time. If we're looking at a specific area, we can ask them what are people saying about pushchairs at the moment, and we can gain all the sort of complaints, trends, that sort of thing. Social media, again, we've got a social media team that handle our different channels, so we can, what are people reacting to, what are they saying about certain aspects of certain products. Store colleagues, from my own personal point of view, is a really fantastic asset that we have as a company. I think as a nursery brand, it differentiates us within the marketplace that we've got so many physical stores. So having the ability to go and talk to store colleagues directly, they're the boots on the ground, they're the people who are interacting with customers day in, day out. So it really helps us to understand what they're being asked for, what they're being asked about, what challenges they're encountering. So yeah, lots of customer facing aspects of the business, but then also the more business facing side of it, talking to people in spares and repairs, what products are we seeing coming back and why, what are the recurring themes, how can we address that in future products. Manufacturing technology partners, what's out there, what's going on in terms of material innovation and development, but also just our existing supply chain and factories. We've got things that we can learn from them in terms of capabilities or challenges, and then we've got a great team of sourcing and developers as well. So like, designers are troublesome people who set lots of other people in the business challenges to help execute our ideas. So having a great team of developers that really understand the vision of what we're trying to create and why is just super helpful. So yeah, a bit about sort of us as a kind of business entity as NPD. And I guess, what we want to do through all that knowledge is help to build a bigger picture idea of where the landscape of our products sit, whether that's commercial or whether it's already protected legally, that sort of thing. But yeah, just that kind of more rounded view of what the landscape is. In terms of our actual NPD approach, we discover, define and develop. So some of these, I guess, terminologies are probably familiar to some people who are kind of versed in, I guess, design theory, that sort of thing. But yeah, what we look to do is find the opportunities and then sort of define what the response is and then go through a development process to get to the end solution. So I'll just dig into those topics a little bit further for you. So our discovery process starts with empathy, moves through to insight, and then from the end of that we aim to get opportunities. So the way that we talk about it is like, you can't identify an opportunity without empathizing with the customer or the end user. So I guess that's really what the subject of this talk is about, giving users what they really want. So obviously parenting, especially in the early years, is just a really kind of challenging emotional journey. And we know that if we can build connections with customers that are positive connections, that helps to build the sort of loyalty that matters and resonates as a business. We could offer discounts and stuff like that, but they're just kind of temporary loyalty kind of things, aren't they? Like, that's just a customer that will go to whoever's offering the best deals, whereas we want our kind of connection to be a bit more meaningful, maybe a bit less transient. So yeah, our mission is to inspire and support parents to be the best that they can be, and we want them to be confident, capable, and love lives with the little ones. So we want to just understand lots of different facets of their lives and kind of their journey, really. So one of the things that we try and do is always have this question in the back of our minds: are we helping? And that helps us to build the product experiences that we do. So if the answer is yes, well, that's great. How do we keep on doing that? And if no, that's a kind of good place to start. So it's all right, well, how can we help with that? So the way that we might go around building that picture of lifestyles, routines, expectations, behaviors is through dialogues with the user. So we've got a number of ways that we can have direct dialogues. So we do surveys, we do workshops, interviews, lived experiences. Obviously, a vast amount of people are parents. It's something that they're always kind of happy to talk about. Just kind of anecdotally, before I was at Mamas and Papas, a few years ago, I worked at an agency that was in transport design. So a lot of that was aircraft seating, and there seems to be some parallels between lots of people get emotional about flying in economy class and love to talk about it, and the same thing goes for being parents. Like, lots of people like to describe the experiences that they've had, and I've designed lots of other types of products, and people aren't always as forthcoming with their kind of emotions about it. So it's just quite interesting sometimes that there are different types of experiences that people feel really passionate about. I don't know in the case of economy class travel whether it's just because it's so appalling that people just want to scream from the rooftops about it, maybe, but yeah, it's probably a conversation for a different day. And then in terms of indirect dialogues, we look on social media and see some of the observations, the type of comments that people are making. We read through product reviews. There might be kind of macro societal or economic trends. We see Gen Z coming through as a new consumer set. I think they're growing 5% year on year as a nursery consumer. So, what different attitudes do they bring with them? And then online forums. It's always a fun Friday afternoon looking on Mumsnet to see what people are saying about our products or other people's products. Often a bit of a minefield and a wormhole, but always insightful nevertheless. So then once we've got all these kind of different, all this noise really, all these data points, what we tend to do is kind of collate and combine them. We use Miro, which is an online whiteboarding software. And that, I guess, is the digital version of that kind of stereotypical picture you've always seen of design agencies where there's post-its all over the walls and stuff. So what's helpful to have that digitized is the fact that we can zoom in and zoom out, and zooming out's like a really cool experience because you can just sort of see all these kind of, this constellation of post-it notes. And what we're looking for then is what are the patterns between what people are telling us. You might have somebody from customer care telling us something that someone in store has also told us, and someone on Mumsnet has also ranted about it. So like we can kind of join those dots together and go, well, maybe there's something there. Often project opportunities start with a problem. If everything was great, it's unlikely that you would be designing something off the back of it. So I guess from a designer point of view, it's this sort of philosophy that problems are good. Because once we know what the problem is, we can start to think how we can solve it and connect it to a product experience. So in terms of sort of defining the response, what we do is sort of flesh out a concept strategy, and it's likely that it won't just be one concept strategy, it could be two, three, etc. So what we're not doing here is trying to solve what it looks like. We just want to come up with a product experience that complements the needs within the opportunity that we identified. So yeah, you've got factors like the physical parameters, but also the must, should, and could have features. We like to kind of categorize it like that because we might have ideas around what it could do or what attributes or characteristic it could have, but we don't necessarily know the feasibility of that yet. And something that we'll go on to after that is validating the strategy, and that's where we might sort of rank the different must have or should have or could have features. So we ask a lot of questions at this stage, you know, right the way through from will it sell through to is it right for us. You know, we obviously have a brand character and a brand presence. We've been around for a while, so people have a understanding or an idea of who we are and what we are and what we should be doing. So I think there's a degree of right to play in certain spaces. You know, you can't just pop up and launch a product in an area that you've got no credibility in, I guess. Or you can, but it takes a hell of a lot of investment from a kind of marketing, selling, storytelling, educating the user point of view. So again, depending on the product, we might do that, but obviously that's a double down in investment sort of thing. So I guess this to a degree is a sort of minimum viable product framework that we're going through to work out what is the strongest strategy, what is the most suitable for us. And I think, as I've said there in that sort of middle sentence about depending how we execute the solution, that's quite a key kind of thing, because you're never going to get from the user exactly what the product, exactly how the product does what they want it to do. They'll tell us what the attribute is, but they won't tell us how that's executed. That's down to us as creatives to try and connect those dots together. So that, I guess that's what I mean here in terms of this isn't about what it looks like, it's about what it does, but it's not how it does it either. So I guess to kind of articulate that in a product, we might talk to people about high chairs, and the biggest theme out of high chairs is that people want them to be easy to clean. So it's like, right, so in this brief, the high chair must be easy to clean. What does that look like? How would you make a high chair easy to clean? Or on a push chair, people tell us that they want a really upright seat, because when your child gets to between 6 and 12 months, they're quite alert, so they're pulling forwards. So if your seat's already upright, that's a great thing. There could be 5 or 6 different ways of achieving an upright seat. So it's really that kind of top level, this is what it has to do. This is the functionality of it, the feature, I guess, but we're yet to execute it, if that makes sense to everyone. So then once the brief is defined and validated and we know what these sort of hard points are, I guess the way I like to think about it is the brief is a dot-to-dot drawing before you've drawn any lines, and the development process is joining those dots together, but it's not a predetermined shape that those dots create. You can kind of freestyle between them with a bit of artistic license. So we go through the different stages of our development process, which are kind of loosely speaking, ideation, prototyping, testing, and implementation. But as anyone who's got experience of developing a product knows, it doesn't work in a straight line. There's lots of iterative work, rethinking, reworking, and revisions. So for example, we might have got that easy to clean theme here for a high chair design or a booster seat. we might we might take that insight and design it in a specific way. We might prototype it and come through to testing, and testing works in not lots of different ways. It could be through compliance, or it could be user testing. It gets to user testing and they go, well, that was really difficult to clean. So we're like, oh, nuts. So we'll go back to the start again and come up with a different idea. Or it might be a mechanism for how a high chair folds, a push chair folds, and we have an idea, we prototype it, not happy with how it's working, back to the drawing board again. This dashed line is a nasty one because that's after we've implemented a product. So this represents continuous improvement. So we might launch a product and start experiencing a number of returns in a certain area, maybe a handlebar's too wobbly. So that's where it has to come back into the design and development process so that we can rework it. It could just go through testing again to clarify whether it's grown a problem, or we might need to go all the way back to coming up with a new idea as to how to solve it, which is quite a annoying thing to have after something's already been implemented. We don't see that super often, but obviously returns can relate to minor things as well as major things. And then, just a few reasons why we might rework things. So I won't labour these, but there's everything from we might prototype something, 3D print it at scale, don't really like how it looks, or it looks too big and chunky, so we'll rework it. Or it could be that the manufacturing quality in a tooling sample isn't what we want, so we need to get them to redo something, we need to make some modifications to the tool. It could be a safety and compliance thing. There's a real, they can only test what's in front of them at a moment in time. They can advise theoretically on ideas and stuff, but their real competence from a compliance testing thing is having the thing in front of them and probing it, wobbling it, and running it down a rolling road. So if it fails something there, again, we have to react to it. So I just thought I'd give you a little case study on one of the products that we've recently developed. So Tempo is a rocker bouncer that launched in January 2023. So the original brief was to explore the interface between user needs and the rocker bouncer category. We knew that our existing portfolio was a little bit dated, so the starting point for it was quite broad. Products that we have feel outdated now. When we look at the rest of the marketplace, what can we do? So in terms of the kind of ultimate response, we came up with a product that was multimodal. We were aware that this product was going to be launching in a time where people were particularly sensitive to the cost of living. So if you can design a product that feels like it does more, then a customer that's in more of a kind of value seeker mindset will hopefully that product will resonate with them with a little bit more. Coming up with something that looks really unique in terms of its shape, as well as having a functionality to it, was seen as a real benefit, because then it's going to stand out in terms of the marketplace. And obviously the digital marketplace is increasingly kind of strong, so if you can create that digital shelf impact as well, then that's something that we saw as really beneficial. One aspect, I don't know how familiar all you guys are with these sorts of products, but one aspect that's quite common on a rocker bouncer is a toy bar. And it's a fundamental requirement that if you try and lift the product up with the toy arm, that it comes off, because we don't want parents carrying a baby in a bouncer around the house by the toy arm, so it can't be seen as a handle. So we decided to make it magnetic so that if anyone did try to lift it, it would pop off straight away. But also we made it so that it would fold down, because in my own experience, when I used one of these baby bouncers, the toy arm popped off. I threw it on the floor, picked the bouncer up, walked across to the other side of the room, and then the toy arm is on the other end of the living room. So being a tired parent, I got slightly peeved by that. So the idea that the toy arm can stay on the product in different modes, we thought was really valuable. as well as that kind of experiential insight, I guess it also gives you just better access to baby when you want it. If there's a toy arm in the way and you're trying to put a baby into the product or take baby out of the product, it's quite annoying. So just that ability to quickly move it down was really helpful. And then we look to optimize the comfort in it. I mean, we do that as a baseline on all our products, but just I guess a couple of the examples of how we did it. It's got a really soft, supportive slung seat around this tubular frame, which helps promote good posture as well. And then we also developed a nip-proof harness so that it's still safe and secure, but you don't risk the, I guess, show and tell. There's side release clips that you get on a backpack, and they've got that kind of really signature, like loud, clippy noise. You've got a lovely little precious bundle of joy sat in this bouncer. You don't really want loud, clippy noises, but also you don't want the risk of pinching skin and things like that. So just a small feature on the product that helps kind of just support the story of, caring and comfort. But I've described the kind of end product here, and it's not just a kind of, it should have that feature designed. So I thought I'd kind of just highlight a few of the key developments that were involved. So we wanted people to feel like this was a premium product because we consider ourselves a premium brand. But whilst it doesn't have certain premium features like the ability to fold, for example, we wanted to make sure that it had other aspects, so it feels more robust and substantial because it's got a relatively thick cross-section tubular frame. But one of the nice things is that it's tool-free assembly because it uses sprung pins to all go together, and tool-free assembly is something that's seen as a more premium kind of aspect. So one of the things that obviously went at the start of this project is the market positioning and understanding where it sits in a kind of cost landscape. So we're obviously not going for the highest price point, so we can't necessarily do all of the things that a high price point product would have. One of the really cool things that we did with this product was we knew we wanted it to rock, so we developed a rig, and there's kind of a screw there, and the more you screw it, the steeper that curve gets. So we could explore how that rock worked. And this is a big reach, but I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but when I was growing up, the local pub used to have the old school cast iron sewing machine tables in there, and they've got like a pedal thing on the floor, and I was forever playing with it all the time, but it was a really satisfying sort of action, physical interaction. So when we were developing this, I was like, I want the product to remind me of that sort of feeling of something rocking really rhythmically. So we took it around the office, we trialed it with users, friends and family, that sort of thing, just to get that sort of right rocking motion. And then based on that, because the curve shape changed, it meant that the kickstand that we used to prop it up in a different mode, it changed shapes. So it kind of went from short to long. It was plastic, too big to be plastic, very expensive molding, just lots more plastic as well, not a great thing. So we moved to a tubular solution, but there was a safety concern with that, so we had to put a cross member through it. So just an example of how we're having to take on board some of the technical and manufacturability considerations as we're going through there. And then one of the really cool things that we do on all of our products is fitting trials. So we kind of reach out to contacts of the company, if you like, so everybody's friends and family that have recently had babies and stuff, and try and encourage them to come in so that we can put real life babies in our products and just measure them, measure the soft aspects around them and make sure that they're fitting in properly. Because we use ergonomic data, we've got sort of libraries of CAD mannequins and World Health Organization data and stuff like that, but there's no better thing than putting a real life user in a product to make sure it actually fits them. And then I just want to show you, if I may, this. I think it's about 10 seconds, this video. Can everyone see that? I'll just press play on it. So I think this is quite a cool video because it just demonstrates like the number of different sort of prototypes that we went through to get to the end product. And this isn't an exhaustive collection of them. There were sort of isolated bench prototypes, if you like. But yeah, just through those sort of 7 rigs there, you can see that there's a kind of development in terms of functionality, shape, construction, that sort of thing, and then this being the end product here. So I think that kind of nicely tells a bit of that story, that we expect our design development process to be iterative. We don't expect it to be this sort of unicorn linear. Sorry, I think if that's a question, I'll just come to that at the end, if that's all right.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned it. Yeah, if anyone does have any questions, put them in the chat, and then you can ask them at the end. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. I think, well, just a quick one on the impact of Tempo as a product. So it had a return on tool and investment with 2 months because it sort of blew up as a product. It did really well, resonated with the marketplace. Became our best-selling product in our equipment category. So that's not just bouncers, that's high chairs, or basically anything that's an interior-focused hard good. So yeah, and that wasn't just M&P products, that was our other branded products that we sell. And then within 4 months, it was in the sort of top 20 performing equipment products of the year. So yeah, that was quite pleasing. And then it sort of rounded off, I think 6 to 9 months later, by getting a gold award in the Love by Parents award, which was cool because that's actually voted for by parents. It's not kind of some random set of judges. So yeah, that was quite a nice impact. And then I just thought I'd point out that it's kind of not an isolated case, if you like, Tempo. Acaro is probably one of our best known products, and that was the first, I think that launched in 2016, and that was the first pushchair that folded with one hand. Looking into bedside sleeping, we created Lua, which is one of the only products, I think it was the first product that we kind of navigated the compliance landscape to create a product where you didn't have to strap it to the bed, which, as you can see, has benefits because you can swivel and get your feet down and stuff like that. Whereas a lot of the other products, while they don't necessarily show you in the marketing collateral, they do have to be strapped to a bed, which can be quite restricting. The Bug 3-in-1 floor seat goes from 3 months to 3 years old and just addresses some of the different needs. There were already floor seats in existence, but we looked at how people use them and where people need to use them and realised that there were sort of different modes and different requirements within those modes that needed fulfilling. So we came up with that as a solution. And then finally, the latest product that we've launched is the Libro Stroller, which is our thinnest, lightest pushchair. And we like to say that that's designed for every day, because when we looked at the lightweight market, lots of other people are doing pushchairs that fold up and go on aeroplanes. But when we were talking to users as well and store colleagues, they were telling us, well, what about the other 50 weeks of the year when you're not on holiday? You're doing the school run. You want something that goes in the boot and you can also do the big shop. So yeah, it's sort of, we just kind of wanted to not go along with the crowd for the sake of it. We know we'll make money in doing the same thing, but can we create a product that's maybe more meaningful and also commercially successful by treading a different path, maybe. So yeah, I guess that's the kind of culmination of what I was going to talk to you about, I guess. And finally, we are recruiting. We're looking to grow our team. So if I know I'm talking to a room full of people who are in the kind of design, engineering, manufacturing space. So if anyone's interested or wants to find out more, you can scan the QR code there or have a look on our website on the careers portal. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Me, Terry.
Thanks, Nick. That's great. I'll share that QR code afterwards if people have another chance to. Sorry, I'll just turn that off. There we go. I'll share that QR code just afterwards in case people didn't get a chance to do it. But I think before anything else, I think it's a while since we've done a Zoom round of applause. But rather than it's jazz hands, yes. So thanks for that, Nick. That was great.
Thanks. Cheers.
Because it gets really noisy when everyone's clapping on Zoom. No, that was great. Thanks. Brilliant insight there. It's funny because as a parent myself, although it was a long time ago, it's when you're using a pushchair or any product and you've got a screaming kid under your arm, that's when you really find out whether a product has been well designed or not. So it's great to see how much thought and effort goes into making those products as good as they can be. So did anyone have any questions or comments? Or sorry, Jane, you had something you wanted to ask, Jane, which is predictably about IP, but then I suppose that is your job.
Well, yes, but it means first of all, Mamas and Papas have a reputation of being a premium brand. Both my ears picked up anyway when Rick was talking about aeroplane seats, because they've been the subject of an awful lot of litigation lately. It was just simply about methodology. When you would actually get something picked up and taken off for registration, because your designs do seem to be novel and have individual character, which would mean they'd be registerable. And some of the ideas which you have are probably rather like the passenger seats of aircraft. They may actually be inventions which you can patent them. Now, do you have any regular contact on a day-to-day basis with patent attorneys, in-house or external, or is it just something which is made by a decision which is made by management, and you might just get called in as and when?
So I guess to kind of answer it in two sections, in terms of a methodology, it's not a hard must-have that our features need to be patentable and inventive. Yeah. But we obviously, it's a benefit if we create something that's unique and protectable. And then secondly, so we have an internal legal team that liaises with an external patent firm, and we have we register invention and design disclosures on a lot of our products.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I just wanted to see how it was done.
So the project the project manager on each project tends to do most of the liaison, and then if they need any assets from us as a sort of design and engineering team, then we can sort of help with that. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does indeed, and if I may say so, that's how it should be done. But not every business does do it in that way, and sometimes they miss an awful lot of the value which they create.
I'm aware that some firms offer, like, you can send them a 3D file and they'll do all the drawings for you, but
yeah,
in our experience, that just equals more communication, because you have to describe exactly how the product works so that they don't miss a kind of facet of it. Whereas I guess if the responsibility sits within the purview of the person who's come up with the thing in the first place, it's sort of, they can supply all the information more easily or more readily, if that makes sense.
Yes, indeed it does. But what you describe, I think, is how it should be done.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thanks for that, Jane. Abigail, you had something you wanted to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, as well. That was super interesting. I was wondering, how do you balance your time with developing brand new products and then also improving existing products? Because I appreciate Mamas and Papas has like a massive catalogue of different types of products.
Um, I guess the continuous improvement stuff that I described is more based around something that might be related to um, our ability to continue selling that product. So like it's more of an engineering concern. So that would go into the engineering team, and they would sort of come up with a solution, asking us if they think it's kind of like, well, this might impact the user experience or the appearance. So what's your thoughts on that sort of thing? In terms of our focus is generally 90% on new product development, but obviously those products that process could be anywhere up to 4 years, depending on the complexity or the size of the product. So we're often kind of revisiting projects. So whilst we might be on the project from start to finish, in terms of a kind of resource plan, it's not 4 years constantly on that project. I guess what I'm saying is, when we don't necessarily do updates to products in the same way that other brands would. So like if you look at Bugaboo, for example, one of their best-selling pushchairs is the B, and I think they're on the B5 or something. But in terms of actual updates, like one of them, I think one year just had a kickstand on it, which is a very minor update. We don't generally do that sort of thing. It's more kind of might be internal structural updates to something, or it's not necessarily here's a amazing new feature we've added to the product. We would expect to put that on just a completely new product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just interesting to sort of find out, I suppose, that like you're very much focused on sort of innovation and bringing the new products to market, and then once a product's been established, I suppose because Mamas and Papas spend so long developing their product, they don't need to be sort of reinventing it each year. And it is true that like the products sort of they have that longevity, which I think is really nice to see.
I think one thing I'd add is there's a lot of intensive work done on a category basis. So that's like I think in the last few months we launched 5 new SKUs of our Recaro pushchair, which was new colorways. But in terms of it might not just be that the chassis and the fabrics have changed. There might be one that's more kind of driven towards an outdoorsy customer. So like an aspect of the softs on the product might be more outdoors driven. So it'll be, thicker, it might have different weatherproof coatings, that sort of thing. So in that sense, we are running those things simultaneously, and they are a design process, not just an engineering exercise. But that's handled as a team. So I guess fundamentally, to answer your question, is we just absorb it in terms of like things, parallel work streams for that sort of thing. Because it would be wrong for me to say, well, yeah, we launched Recaro in 2016 and we've never updated it, sort of thing, visibly, because we've done lots of different SKUs on it. But fundamentally, it's the same underlying product, if that's fair.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really interesting. Thank you for answering my question.
No worries, thanks.
Thanks, Abigail. Anyone else? Okay, good. Right, well, thanks for that, Nick. That was brilliant. And actually, I don't know if it was in one of the one of the first slides you had of the couple who created Mamas and Papas, but I think their daughter Amanda was the child for whom the first pushchair was designed, and she went on to be the innovation. I think she was innovation manager or design manager for a while. And we did a conference in the mid-teens, and she did a talk there around. They were doing a lot of work around the kind of second-hand market or the refurbished market for Mamas and Papas products, and she was kind of leading on that. And she gave a really interesting talk on that approach and how they'd done it. And it was filmed. I believe we've got a copy of it somewhere up on Vimeo, which is a bit like YouTube. So if I can dig it out, I'll send a link to it next week, so you can have another look at another aspect of Mamas and Papas and the kind of the way they gather insights on what customers might want. But
that would be interesting to see.
I'm sure it was definitely filmed. I just need to dig around a bit to find it. So I'll send that out. Fab, thanks for that. So, John, did you want to a quick one from John?
I'm just wondering sort of how you getting back to the really you want things. How do you filter your kind of must, should, and coulds? Because obviously, you're going to get a huge amount of input in terms of what people are saying, their demands or the requirements for these things are. And it can be quite hard to kind of go, what adds value to the product? What does it really need versus just listening and kind of going, oh, well, someone said they wanted this, so we'll do it type thing. How do you have a process for managing that decision making?
I guess it's not so much a formal kind of process. It's a lot of it is just trying to take the data from the SMEs within the business to try and understand how we can rank them. And I guess depending on what the product is and what the feature is, the metrics would differ. And also the aims of the product or project. So it's a bit of a political answer, but it's not really something that's easily kind of for me to articulate, or I can't really kind of contextualize it.
Which suggests it's probably as difficult for them as it is for you, John. There's no easy answer.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I asked the question, is because, there's always that, do you give your customers everything that they're asking for? Or how do you, I suppose you possibly don't have quite as direct dialogue. You get input, you go away to discuss that internally with us and our customers. We very much have to have a conversation directly with them of what we think we should give them and what we try to justify that we're not going to give them, and it could be, you just can't say yes to everything.
We have done focus groups on certain projects, sometimes where it's in a product category where we don't operate as frequently or as heavily, but often it's difficult, isn't it? Because you need a vehicle to for people to react to for or against. But I guess in our projects or our products, they often come with a combination of features. Like, it's difficult to just do one thing in isolation and go, what do you think, guys? Because how it looks might sort of sway what they think.
I was just going to say, you get into the objective and subjective. It's very easy kind of the whole objective things of, right, okay, it won't tip or it'll weigh this much or it'll be this size, but whenever you get more to subjective stuff, it's really hard to filter that in terms of, who's making the decisions on that, and everyone's got their own opinion type thing,
It's the Henry Ford conundrum, isn't it? Because I think he's got that famous quote of, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse.
Exactly.
So it's sort of like, listening to the user is really important, but also filtering what the user says is equally important, and knowing how to filter it is more the challenging thing, I think.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't have a sort of specific where we apply X, Y, Z to it, and that helps.
You don't have a magic formula
Sorry,
I think
John.
one of the things that we have done is, like, when we've done surveys, obviously you can see what the weighting of answers is in response to a quantitative sort of scenario. So if you come up with a ranking from there, then that kind of gives you that kind of good, better, best in terms of features and functionality. But I think just constant conversation with the user throughout the process is really helpful, because it's like, right, tell us what you want. Oh, I want it to do this for me, and then you go away and do the execution and go, here you go, and they're like, well, I didn't mean like that. And it's sort of having that frequent interaction can just help validate that you are doing the right thing. But I think there's a skill as a business in knowing where the touch points are to do that, so that you don't alienate the user with some other aspect of the product. It's also difficult for a user to react to something without the context of the marketplace sometimes as well. I think, like, you know, judging a product in isolation rather than versus its competitors or something. Yeah, I think it's quite a fluid thing.
Great. Thanks for that, John. Thanks, Nick. Right, fab. So can we now, I'm now delighted to welcome Kimberly from Asda. I mean, we all shop in Asda and wander around and buy stuff, but probably don't really appreciate how much thought goes into that process. But I guess that's the point. We're not meant to notice. It's meant to be completely seamless. So Kimberly's going to tell us a bit about how that happens, I think. So I'll just spotlight you. There we go.
Thank you. Right, just give me 2 minutes while, well, hopefully not 2 minutes. Let me share my screen. And you all see that?
And yes, that's looking good. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So slight deviation possibly from maybe what Terry and I were talking about, just because, and I'll come to it shortly, Asda's in a bit of a funny position at the moment whilst we're going through a massive digital transformation project. Well, not just digital, largest retail transformation project in Europe, it's been touted as. So I'll come to that. So really what I'm going to share with you today is more some of my experiences across my career about user research and methods for getting the customer into the heart of the design process. So hopefully there's some takeaways. But I will just caveat that whereas Nick's experience obviously is very much physical product, a lot of my experience has been digital experience. So some product experience within there as well, but just to give you that scene setting. So a little bit more about me. I've been involved in user experience design and research since 2005, and I've worked across a range of industries, as you can see here. So my career really started when UX didn't really have a seat at the table in terms of the software development life cycle. We were seen as an additional add-on. We were very much a internal agency model at the Halifax, and how we got that seat at the table was by building one of the first in-house research labs in the UK. I think it's still operational in the Halifax building in Halifax. Shame we're not there in Halifax today, where we could actually show the impact of hearing from customers and getting their feedback into our product development process. I've been involved in various digital transformation projects, bringing in agile, lean, ways of working. Working at Aviva, they realised that their disruption wasn't going to come from big oil tanker 300-year-old organisations. It was going to come from fintech and the startup scene. So I was responsible for getting some hackathon events up and running where we could start to get the teams thinking more in those ways of how do we start understanding problems, how do we break things down into smaller deliverables, test and learn and iterate. From getting my toes wet with that kind of thinking, I did actually join an Internet of Things startup, where I was then the UX team of one, doing a lot more with a lot less. And also that's where the physical product experience came from. Had a very interesting moment in my career where I was button testing to get the right kind of traction and friction for the button press on top of that product that you can see there, which was a home security product. And then that was taking a product from crowdfunding through to mass market and then through to acquisition as well, and understanding the customer at various points in that journey. We were acquired by a Canadian company, so I worked remotely before it was trendy, and again, fitting into a bigger product offering with our smart camera into thermostats, connected light switches, all with voice interaction. So boomed really in terms of all the options for the customer. I then went on to lead the design and research team out on the beach. So a happy product we were selling, although that was just on the cusp of the pandemic, so nobody was actually going on holiday at the point of which I joined that business. But I did win a number of awards there through team culture and ways of working. And now my journey's brought me to Asda, where I'm managing the UX research team within the e-commerce function. So again, like I said, my experience is skewed more to digital experiences. I'm also an event organizer, been organising the NUX events, Northern User Experience, monthly meetups across the north of England, 500 plus delegate conferences, that kind of stuff for best part of 13 years. We've got loads of content on YouTube, so if any of the stuff that I'm sort of saying here kind of resonates, I can share the link and you can dig into some of the content maybe that we've got on there. And I think I've realised certainly over the last sort of 12, 18 months where my passion really lies. It's not just in the customer experience side of things, but it's also in the teams and the mentoring and the coaching. So I've done 3,000 plus hours of mentoring on ADP List, which is a free platform for getting UX software engineering, all sorts of mentoring experience there. And I'm also starting a coaching apprenticeship too. And I really did win that award. So that's my grandma with my Woman of the Year award from 2023, which I will be forever dining out on. It's sat on my kitchen side, and like to remind my husband of that daily. Okay, so enough about me, what I'm going to share with you today. So the reason why this isn't going to be this is how we do things at Asda is, like I say, we're going through this future transformation program where we are, if you're not aware, we are decoupling from Walmart, which sounds like a celebrity couple divorcing, doesn't it? This decoupling, but we are every possible service, every possible system needs to be unpicked from Walmart to be a standalone Asda product. That's everything that we as employees experience and colleagues through to what the customer experience is, across website through to in stores as well. So we're not working in a normal sort of capacity, but we are setting the foundation up for what our BAU run state looks like. So I will dip in and out of what we're doing at Asda for sure, but I thought it might be helpful just to give you some broader context as well. So I'm going to touch into what we mean by user experience research and where this sits in the design process. I'm going to talk about lean UX in particular, because I think this is a really helpful perspective and mindset shift that teams can have, how this helps us mitigate risks, make things manageable, even research. And the importance of having a shared understanding of who your customer is, and not just that listening and what do they want, but who do we understand them to be? And I've got some tips on maybe how you can do that. How you can then continue to listen to your customer and what avenues they might be, depending on a bit of a sliding scale of resources available. And then that importance of research insights and hard data, which I think we kind of heard from Nick as well, that triangulation between the two. And I've just twigged that. I think I might actually refer back to a couple of things that Nick's already shared. So hopefully there's some good synergies between what we're sharing with you today. So fundamentally, the role of a user experience researcher is about uncovering those user behaviours, the needs, the motivations to make products, services, websites more intuitive and enjoyable for our users. So as you can see, research can be carried out across that double diamond process. The earlier in the process it's more about that problem definition and idea generation, and then moving into more formulative evaluation where you'll see that second dot. And this might be about exploring the competitor landscape. Where does what we're thinking, what already exists in the world, where might we find our spot? What are the existing customer mental models? How do we leverage those? Where are the other opportunities? And then in that second diamond, it's very much about summative evaluation. So does what we're proposing actually work? How do we iterate on what we're proposing? And then finally moving into that listening and monitoring space in the final dot. And I think this is obviously that difference in digital experience versus physical, because we can constantly listen and fine tune, and that cycle can happen maybe more rapidly if we see that there are problems in that digital space. What that might look like is like analytics on your website, for example, and that then feeds into that continuous iteration and improvement. The lion's share of what we focus on is in that qualitative user research. So this is narrative and description about why and how people do things, what their attitudes are, what their expectations are. Fundamentally, it's the why. So this looks like user interviews, diary studies, which are a longer term, longitudinal research method, observational studies. So again, back to maybe what Nick was rounding off on that last point, watching rather than listening. How do people use it? Where do they click? What do they do? Someone might say, oh yeah, your product's great, but it's taken them 10 minutes to complete a task that should have taken only 1 or 2. Usability tests, which probably fall into that category as well. So but then what we actually do is try and balance that with that quantitative. So getting the volume, getting the numbers, the stats, the statistical significance, the data and the analytics, fundamentally the what to support the why. What we might do in that space, very much surveys, as we've already heard mentioned, but this is where we do rely more on our product metrics and analytics. So these might actually sit within different teams. The approach from a UX research perspective that's boomed us certainly over the last 4 years of remote working has been remote testing. And this might be either moderated or unmoderated. And what we mean by that is this is using a dedicated SaaS platform, perhaps. User testing, user Zoom are the kind of the market leaders. I'll come to those later. But this is where your participants can go to a site. It's already preloaded with maybe a screener, so you make sure you get the right participants. You set tasks and scenarios. They get access to a prototype or a live site. And then the system will record the screen, a bit like maybe what you're seeing now. See their face, hear them talking, and then it records a number of metrics that will maybe give you sentiment analysis. Where were there hotspots during their task and their experience where you need to hone in on? It'll give you time on task, and also obviously because you're hearing what they're saying, you're getting their thoughts, and you're also getting facial expressions captured too. So that's when I talk about user interviews and unmoderated, unmoderated bit will just be there following the script on screen. And moderated, they'll have someone like me guiding them through it. I'll be asking the questions and doing some of that observation in person too. I'm going to mention a few methods as I'm talking about this, and it might seem quite flippant, or just do a survey, just do an interview. And these are not skill sets to be taken lightly, and I don't suggest doing these things to really undermine the role of a dedicated researcher. But I know, having been in a startup, for example, you don't always have access to a research, you don't always have access to a dedicated research team. And certainly, I've been, from my industry perspective, from a UX and technical point of view, there's been a lot of layoffs, and a lot of people have maybe reduced the size of their research capacity. So you're seeing a bit more of a trend of people who do researchers in the business versus dedicated researchers. So I'm not saying that that's not a bad thing to happen, but it's just a mindfulness that there's a dedicated skill set and there's a technique around making sure that you get your question set right and your scripting right. Because obviously it's easy to create a badly constructed survey or an interview script, which can easily lead you up the garden path with misleading insights just because that research was poorly planned. So if I make a recommendation of maybe doing surveys, do your research on how to do your research is all I'm maybe sort of caveating that with. So I've mentioned about Lean UX. If you've not come across this as a methodology before, really recommend this book that's up here by Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden. very centered around other lean practices, just starts to apply itself to a little bit more around understanding your user, certainly in that software and digital experience perspective. But one of the challenges that we can face from a research point of view is the perception of time that it can take. So of course, the argument to that is that the impact of building something wrong or building the wrong thing altogether can be even more costly and detrimental and have that time impact, again, as we saw with what Nick was showing with the design iteration approach. So this is where the Lean UX approach has really sort of helped with that. So this is really about more regular and frequent user testing. So in the notion of software development, where you might do sprints, 2 weekly sprints, we'd expect really for one of those days to be a user testing day with a minimum of 5 users on a key focus area. So this isn't looking at statistical significance, but it is helping the teams to really identify the boulders in the road, and also to give the information sent on other issues that might require exploration. So you imagine you've got your North Star product vision trajectory, all the planning and all the product management focus is kind of leading you to there. Your regular user testing is making sure you're on track at these continuous points. And it's also about making research, and especially the data synthesis, more of a team sport, so that the teams have that understanding of the customer is really ingrained as a squad level, rather than just everything being contained within that researcher's head. And then they're not a single point of failure, or there's a reliance or a dependence on them to have that perspective. It's been really quite powerful to see engineers craving that time, watching users go through screens and interactions and what have you. And then also cite back, oh, well, we can't do X, Y, and Z because we saw A, B, and C in user research. Just gets everybody on that same page. And on the subject of getting everybody on that same page, understanding who your customer is to start with is a really valuable exercise. And one really easy, simple way to kind of get into this mode is with this proto-persona exercise. So this is clearly, as you can see, a very lean, agile, easily throw away if we're wrong, when that's the point of this exercise. So this is about your customer, your teams declaring their assumptions, what they believe to be true about their customers. And you'll see there's the 4 quadrants. If you're not familiar with this, you do a bit of a rough sketch of who you think your customer is, some of their key demographic information, what their behaviours might be, or something a little bit richer detail about them, what their goals might be or their problems in relation to your specific project or product, and then what features or needs might try and meet those. And then the intention with this is twofold. One, everybody's got everything out in the open, maybe their own biases, their thoughts, assumptions, and you can have the conversation. So as a team, you're coming together around who is the customer. User-centered design 101. Second of all, you've now got a testable asset to go and find some data to understand, is this true, to validate it. Can you move forward with certainty that this is what your customer looks like, this is what their needs are? And if you're wrong, well, it's only a few stickies on a piece of flip chart paper. But if you're right, well, great, we can move forward with some certainty. And this whole notion of the Lean UX, as you saw on the previous one, is very much about mitigating risk. So less effort, how we find some data to give us that certainty, and then we can move forward from there. And the data you might want to use for something like that might be, well, have you got sales data? Have you got existing customer info? Can you look to get that data if you don't have it through surveys, conducting those user interviews? Personas can be a bit of a Marmite tool for use in the design process, but I'm a fan of them. And the reason why I'm a fan of them is because we are on the beach, and this is something I'm looking to implement at Asda, moved from them being a static pen portrait of this is who our customer is, they do X, Y, and Z, to being something that was more dynamic and fluid for us in terms of understanding not just who the user is, but their context of interacting with our product at a single point. So what we found when we looked at booking data, we had a number of customers who were repeat bookers. Some of those people religiously booked the same holiday at the same time, the same resort, year in, year out. Other customers were booking different holiday types with different people, smaller groups, bigger groups, just the two of them, small breaks, 2-week holidays. So you can start to see there that that one user is always that person, but their scenario and their need is the thing that's dynamic and that changes. And I think this is just what we found to really start to elevate this persona approach. Gets your team talking, gets your customer at the heart of your considerations and your decisions, and starts to give you just something that opens up thinking, spotting opportunities, and again, using these as testable assets to go and validate, is this true? So as you'll see there, the kind of the variables and the attributes were around destination, mindset. This was something that, again, we saw through user research and through the analytics on the site. You might be just I'm just looking, I'm not here to buy, I'm not here to book, versus no, we've done all the legwork, we know where we're going, we're committed, I'm sat here with my credit card and I'm booking. And you can automatically see that your mindset's very different in those two modes. So how do we design that experience to allow for both parties to kind of be on the site and move through and find their way through that? And then you might be the kind of person who's like, oh, it's only a 200 quid holiday and I can afford to kind of just like go, it'll be all right, it's fine, versus no, I need to check every detail because this is our main holiday and this is a lot of money for me to spend. I want to make sure that I've got everything right. And then from your relationship with the brand, have you ever been on the site before? Have you been on the site but never booked? Versus you're that committed customer and we know who you are and we can start to leverage more of that. So that was a way that we got personas actually more into the design process, and just like I say, had a bit more of a play with things, allowed for storytelling, which is another factor I'm going to come to as well, but all based on data. So those personas are who we saw in the booking data and who our marketing teams would have had in marketing segmentation. So it's all based on that data again. But just also on that point from context, environment and situation, and I think Nick probably touched on some of this around situational versus maybe permanent stuff as well. This is a framework from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, and this is looking at accessibility and people who have assistive needs, when the reality is at some point or other we will all have assistive needs. And I think even out of the frame of reference of assistive needs, if we start to think about our customers in terms of what are their permanent attributes, what are their temporary attributes and situational, again, it just starts to elevate the thinking a little bit more around understanding them better. So I always think the C row is an interesting one to just consider, and it really brings it home, certainly when you're talking about customers that might have assistive needs, but like I say, in that broader context as well. Blind user is visually impaired, potentially permanently, and how do they then, what are their needs versus somebody who has an illness or has had an operation and theirs is more of a temporary impairment, versus the distracted driver one on here is obviously a fine one, but I think a real one that hits home is using your mobile phone in direct sunlight. That's again your momentary situational impairment. So yeah, so just thinking about those contexts of permanent, temporary and situational when you're thinking about how to design best for your customer needs. And also would revisit these assumptions, documents, wherever you're at in terms of scale of fidelity, in terms of understanding your customer, come back to these regularly. Get the data, refine, keep moving, get some more data, have things changed, you know, for your customers or even for you as a business. So going back to the startup that I mentioned, we very much had a customer set right at the start of our crowdfunding campaign that was squarely in the innovator group. As we then went mass market, our early majority customer looked very different to the innovators. So I had to continuously refine who we were representing in our persona documents, for example, to make sure that the designers, the engineers, even our marketing team had these people front of mind, and that we were continuously speaking and seeking these people out just to sense check what we were doing was still what they wanted from us. In terms of listening to your customers, so I've mentioned sort of the user interviews and the platforms. Like I say, UserZoom is what we use at Asda. There are others. And this just allows us to have that opportunity to explore that richness of the customer experience and hear from some of those customers. They become quite quick to turn around as well. So from that lean UX research perspective, you know, we can maybe put a request out to 5 users and get those turned back within a day, and we can get that insight fed back into the team. And this might be asking users to use a prototype that the designers are working on. So we're at that latter stage of the design process, or we might be earlier on where we're just maybe wanting to really get under the skin of a particular problem and explore that as well. But equally, those platforms can be quite pricey. I've also done those kinds of interviews at the kind of looser end of the spectrum, which is why I've got Zoom listed there, where we've set up actual user interviews by recruiting people through Facebook ads, setting up a Zoom session and using the features of Zoom, for example. So recording the session, sharing screen, and even now the transcription of the conversation, so that you've got all those assets then to start to build together a repository of insights and data from your user interviews. And I also just wanted to point out, if anybody is quite new to this as a methodology and want to kind of kick the tires with it, no affiliation, but user interviews apparently do 3 users for free if you sign up. So it might be a nice way just to test the waters with that as a methodology if you think that might work for you. Certainly, like I say, for digital experience testing. Another way for listening to your customers, and this is something that I have established at Asda. We're somewhat in our infancy, but we're hoping that this period of transition that we're about to embark on, this is a foundation step for what we then have for BAU. So I've got a cross-section of team members where we are now forming this community of practice, where all of these people have some means of speaking or hearing from customers. So we've got our contact centre team involved with this. We've got our social media listening team involved with this, PR, our customer experience. So they sit at a more holistic level in Asda, where my team squarely focus on digital experiences and interactions on digital user interfaces. They look at the retail in-store experience as well as what people might be saying about the website. And we all come together now to look at where we're hearing, what we're hearing from our customers across all these different channels. So again, it's that data validation. Are we hearing something quite extensively? What are the product metrics telling us that's happening? Just to give us some validation. So for example, an issue we've been experiencing with the app update, people have been saying it feels slow and laggy. We're getting an awful lot of number of people telling us that, but when we look at the data, it doesn't look any slower, doesn't the website? So that's then a bit of a balance of, is that just because there's been a change and people are just adjusting, versus actually is the data telling us something different? So I haven't got any conclusion to that or resolution to that yet, but it's something we are certainly monitoring. But that's just an example where we've maybe got some tension between what customers are saying versus what the analytics are telling us. And then I thought it made me smile when Nick mentioned Mumsnet, because I'm like, I'm going to mention Mumsnet too. So be where your customers are. It was interesting when I was on the beach, we actually uncovered a Facebook group for customers who had booked with us and then were struggling to self-serve on our post-book booking system. So fair to say the post-book journey hadn't had a lot of love. It was probably been designed and built once and very infrequently tinkered with sort of post-launch. Consequently, there were some challenging journeys within that. So what this Facebook group, which had been set up purely by customers, was for them to try and ask questions and self-serve. Obviously a fundamental blind spot for us, but when we uncovered it, it was an absolute goldmine of information for the product team. And in fact, I think they got their first sort of 5 priorities for their, when we did step up a squad to start focusing on that part of the experience, their first 5 features they wanted to work on came out of what we were seeing there. So your customers are going to be in places maybe where you don't expect them to be, or they're not coming to you with those issues. So can you be where they are? Another example of us doing that a bit more in person, we wanted to speak to new parents when I worked at Aviva. So we set up some interview sessions at like mother and baby groups in and around York, so we could actually be where those customers are, get in front of them and have those conversations in more of a natural setting. Obviously, review sites are another helpful place to kind of go and look. If you've got an app as part of the experience, the App Store reviews again are a really helpful place just to see where problems are, and even not just even problems, but how they're describing things. What are they what can you sort of seemingly tell are important to your customers from what they're saying? And that was where Mumsnet came in. So we were looking at, content designer was looking at the description of our app in the App Store, and it mentioned grocery shopping. And she wondered, well, is that how we refer to it? I don't talk about, I'm going grocery shopping. Is this an inherited Americanism from Walmart, for example? I'm going to go on Mumsnet. Oh, well, she actually did some Google analytics, and groceries was coming up as a high-ranking search term. She's like, it still doesn't feel right. What are people actually saying in natural language in conversation? And that's where Mumsnet came in. She went in and had a look, and just to kind of really understand a little bit more of that behaviour and that attitude, I guess. And so, you know, it's again being where your customers are and understanding that a little bit more. So Mumsnet can be a bit of a wealth of information for that, for sure. Referenced twice, so it must be true. And then I've mentioned about insights and data, and there's been a couple of times where the two have kind of crossed over. So just for complete clarity, data tells you the what and research tells you the why. There've been definite instances where we've fallen foul at Asda of just relying on the data. And even in my last role on the beach, we had a very strong belief that we were data driven. However, that sometimes meant that we couldn't go off on something that we picked up on research because there was a bit of a hunch, there was that sniff test, there was that information sent that there was something here. It was almost like that, well, it needed to be data. Where's the data to support that? And the example that I was going to give about what we've got at Asda probably again goes back into that situational point of view. We were making the assumption that just because you'd bought a vegan meal, you were a vegan. And you may well be, and that would be a permanent thing, a permanent choice or a necessity. But it might also be situational. If that product was purchased in January, were you doing veganuary with no intention of doing it beyond then? Or did you have a friend who was coming over who was vegan, and then it's more situational again? So just relying on the data can kind of paint you into a bit of a corner, just as much as only relying on the noisy customers going, the roof's on, you know, and the site's loading, when I can say it, the site speed is slowing me down, but the data's not backing that up. So there's a real sort of tension and a conversation then of which fires are we going to kind of leave burning, or do we need to sort of fix? And this is again where optimization and conversion rate optimization teams can be your friend. Again, I'm very much talking from a digital experience perspective, because what that you can do in that space is get your volume in terms of the site and the experience, you know, versus doing the 5 user testing. It's real world as well, so it's actively what customers are doing on your site. But what they can't necessarily get is the why a particular test has run. So this is where you've put one version of a site page up and another version and send it out to proportion of the website traffic. There's definitely, again, that symbiotic relationship between research and data to try and tell that story and really understand what's going on. So we use Adobe Analytics. There's obviously Google Analytics and possibly others, but 2 market leaders there. And that's where we get our product metrics from, just to see what's the traffic coming into the site, how are they moving through that funnel of purchase, who's in that basket building mode, for example, from a grocery shop at the moment, how many are completing that purchase, what's the time, and you can delve into certain behavioral attributes that can be attributed to what you've seen in user research, for example. And then there's also these additional analytics tools such as Content Square and Medallia. So we obviously, as part of Asda, have the George website. So that's our fashion and homeware offering. We've got Content Square on one and Medallia on one. And this allows you to then have session replays, heat maps, things like that, where we can actually see where customers have actually clicked on site as well. So it's just this layering of what have we heard in research, what are customers telling us in feedback, what are we seeing on the site, both in terms of hard data from a product perspective, but also this behavioural perspective too. And all those things combined are a really powerful way for us to understand this is something we need to fix, this is an opportunity, and then we can start the design process from there, depending on where we think we've sort of fallen. And it just gives us that confidence. And I keep using that word. I've got like my bottomly bingo play cards, and triangulating insights has definitely made it on there. So, just to summarise, I can't say this enough, but lean is definitely the way forward to kind of get a foot in the door and kind of build momentum and test our assumptions and learn from there. Everything can be tested. And I think thinking about our opinion as assumption just starts to open up that as a conversation as well for how we can maybe test those things and move forward with confidence. Design and research being that team sport. So how do we collaborate? How do we bring people in? How do we, from a research point of view, allow people to be those people who do research? And then obviously that be insights and data driven to really enforce that confidence about, is this the right thing for our customer? Is this what we should be doing? And that's your lot. Obviously, it'd be great if people wanted to connect. That's my QR code for getting me on LinkedIn, but I'm sure Terry will be sharing a lot of this stuff anyway. But yeah, happy to take any questions. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Wow, thanks, Kimberly. Another masterclass in how to do amazing research and amazing design. That was fabulous. Thank you.
No worries.
I'm sure everyone will join me in doing the appreciation. So does anyone have any? I might need to give you a bit of time to let that sink in, but does anyone have any questions or comments or observations? Yes, Jane, thank you. Oh, I think has Jane frozen? Yeah, I think being in home Firth probably doesn't have the brilliant internet connection. So we'll come back to Jane when she's unfrozen herself. Anyone else?
I had a quick one, Terry, if that's all right.
Of course, certainly.
Yeah, what do you see the main differences?
Sorry, could choose here from Michael first, and then yourself, John. Sorry, Michael, you're quite quiet also, so
Am I?
do it a bit welly.
I'll scream at the camera then.
That's better.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kimberly. One of the bits that I was a bit of quite a hard relate for me was as a startup, the cost of the tools that are used for the user interviewing. So we have done, as you said, the Zoom, the Google Meet, and then in person when we can.
Yeah.
But you talked about the types of questions and things that you ask in order to not get bad data and end up going off down the wrong road. I know this is quite a difficult question to answer, but have you got any sort of gotchas or like common examples of where you've seen that happen, or particular types of questioning perhaps where you've got to try and avoid or stay clear of?
I think nothing's coming to mind immediately. What does come to mind though, and is when we've had, as much as I've sort of said this notion of team sport, when we've had stakeholders observing, that's been sometimes where there's been a bit of a gotcha, where they've heard something, their interpret, and we've not done data synthesis, we've not consolidated all the user interviews, we've heard one person, and they've kind of gone, oh, well, that's a thing that aligns with my worldview or my perspective, and then completely. And then because of who that stakeholder is, and does tend to be more hippos, if people are familiar with that acronym, who then go, that's what we're going to run with, or they kind of get a bit fixated on that. So I think I'm not necessarily going to answer your question necessarily, but I think as long as if you're not a researcher and you've not got that mind, you've not got that skill set yet built up, that awareness of, are my questions right? And maybe spending the time just validating that. I'm somewhat loath to make this as a recommendation, but equally, I think this is, I don't want this to undermine the research practice, but helpful tools such as AI, for example, can you validate my questions not got bias?
Questions a bit.
And just to help with that. But I don't know if any of the platforms like usertesting.com, UserZoom, they behind the scenes have got quite extensive academy and learning material once you've obviously subscribed. I don't know if some of that stuff is actually available in front of the paywall, but for sure there will be people such as myself who have done talks like this and maybe given some pointers. So I think there's a lot in the community that gets shared around how best to write it. So I would maybe recommend looking for that kind of content just to maybe help with that.
Yeah, thanks. It's interesting that you say that the stakeholders shouldn't be in the room, but when you're a small company,
and it's not necessarily that I don't think they should be there. It's just being mindful of how we manage that and set the scene. Because one thing, I think they should be there because I think research can really shoot itself in the foot where we go, oh yeah, we're going to do this research, and we squirrel ourselves away and then come back with a big bang report. And it's like, oh, who's that useful to? Because has the team moved on? Because that's taken you 4 weeks to deliver a report. No, we need the people in the room. We want them on Miro or physically with stickies, summarizing and pulling together, some thematic analysis to kind of spot where we've got the trends. Do we see that then triangulated to other hard data sets? It should be more like that is my sort of steer, but that needs another hat for us all to wear of that facilitator role and managing the expectations. And maybe it's about giving the stakeholder visibility of the process a bit more, rather than just getting them in the room and then them thinking, not knowing what comes next.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Michael. And then John, you had a question.
Yeah, it's going to sound like I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I'm not. This is my real world situation. It sounds great that you've got access to so many tools, but I suppose my question is, how do you find what your customers really want when you don't have these tools? So to give you an example, if we've got a first of a kind product, so it doesn't exist, we've got nothing to research. It's both software and hardware where we don't have a physical build yet. It's confidential, so we can't talk to people about it. The prototype is maybe up to £1 million, for a singular prototype, and you've got a single discipline team working on it. All the kind of tools that you have accessible that you use in that kind of scenario kind of get stripped away. So have you something fundamentally that kind of just you could always head towards or use or rely on, or how would you tackle that?
Yeah, I don't know if my experience at Cocoon, which was the startup, it relates somewhat. I don't think it does in terms of the confidentiality and the scale of what you're describing, but we had hardware and software as a product. At the point at which I joined, we had crowdfunders. So they hadn't bought a product. There was no product experience for them to tell us about. It was just this idea of
Yeah.
basically, in essence, it was a single camera product. So again, and for context, that was at a point where we didn't have Alexas, we didn't have Ring doorbells. It was very much an early category type product. But I was able to kind of get in with the crowdfunders to understand their whys. And this was that was where I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I will give you this context because there might be nuggets in it. Our assumption, or the team's assumption when I joined, so it was me and 5 founders for the first few weeks, their assumption was that it was techie guys who were interested in this product. For me, just doing a data synthesis of who's actually thrown money at us to crowdfunders, it was women over the age of 65, and they were interested in more of the reassurance of protecting the home rather than the coolness of the tech. And it was pretty cool because it was this sub-sound technology and a camera product, blah, blah, blah. So if there's any access to that, I think it's just, again, it's not necessarily about what do they want yet, but understanding who they are and taking it back to that step and challenging some assumptions, if that's possible, might be just a way in. Because then what I did was, yeah, okay, I could maybe speak to those people, but then I also went looking for, well, where do those people hang out? How can I find more of those people that maybe fit that? And again, it goes back to the cadence of which you're doing this kind of stuff and the scale at which it's happening. So what I mean by that is, think with your lean hat on, if it's a problem that's this big, what's the smallest thing we can do that moves us in the direction of understanding more of it? So rather than tackling the problem in its entirety, how can we break it down and find that what's the biggest thing that can have the most impact, but it's the smallest amount of effort for us? And I don't know if maybe reframing the problem in those kinds of parameters might help.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say there, because we obviously had direct contact with our customer, which they happen to be on the other side of the world. But their customers, we don't really speak to them as such. So I think, that's probably the bit I'm going to take away from this, is we maybe need to get a step further up the chain and not just listen to what our customers are filtering and then telling us. We probably need to get horse's mouth type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that filter will be happening and that bias will be getting laid in. Yeah, and then it's just, again, I guess you're pushing for the team sport from a bottom, but without, I'd hate this phrase, but from like a bottom up perspective of, we want that proximity to them so that we can be more efficient and we can be more in tune, and you're not a bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely random. I mean, just to give you an example, we were working on an autonomous vehicle in the agri-tech sector, and just one of the things that, we're half a year into the project, and somebody came up with, oh yeah, you've got to consider armadillo hose, and we're like, you can't write this. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, you use the story for that one.
Yeah, armadillo hose, right? Okay. So yeah, just it's interesting because I kind of see myself at a very different end of the spectrum. Digital, you can iterate quickly. You've got tools. There's methodology to process. We really struggle to kind of how do we correctly identify the needs of our customers and our end users when we find the tools and accessibility to doing that.
I'll just finish off with, I'm a big advocate for putting our user-centered design process back on ourselves. So what's the problem you're facing? How might we fix that? And then hopefully that opens up some more opportunities for you and your team.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, John. Nick, did you have
yeah, it was just in response to the sort of conversation that was going on there. And I just sort of wonder if, I guess the issue that you're describing, John, is how do you validate that this is the right execution of the solution to the problem that you identified? Is that kind of correct?
I mean, it's twofold. The thing is, it's very expensive for us once we make a decision about, right, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
But we're in that catch-22 of, we don't know what we don't know, and we can only find that out by having a product to test.
Yeah.
But we've got to be pretty sure we're
on the right track,
doing our best guess at what that product's going to be. Because as I say, usually our first prototypes cost our customers $500,000 or something like that. It's not something that we lash up quickly.
Yeah.
They're very expensive individual prototypes.
And have you got like a formal process in place, or a formalized process for getting to the point of identifying what the solution is?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a process we follow. We've got obviously new product development process. We've got needs and wants. We've got what we call clarity matrices. We've got a number of tools we use. But again, our other problem is that we don't operate in one sector. So one product could be architect, another could be in an electrification sector, another one could be in automotive. So we just have such huge diversity in our project types, our customer locations, that it's just so hard to tease out what our customers really need. So
cool.
It's just interesting to hear, as I say, how different industries and different companies approach this and what they can, and I suppose in our case can't access them easily.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. No easy answers again, but I'm sure there'll be things that filter through maybe over the weekend that you've heard that might help.
Yes, all very interesting stuff. So thank you to both Kimberly and Nick.
Also had a follow-up question for Kimberly, if that's all right.
Of course.
It was more on just your mentioning of like stakeholders, and I was sort of thinking, well, stakeholders within the business, and like, do you kind of have a formalized stages or milestones within your process that everybody understands? Because I guess a lot of what you're describing is, and a lot of it was talking about even prior to design, so it's kind of taking the subjectivity out of what you're aiming to do so that it kind of can't be questioned, if you like, because obviously the fundamental issue of design is that it's subjective and it becomes a battle of opinions or a loudest voice in the room sort of thing. So if you've got data that you can back up the reasons why you're doing what you're doing it for, it makes sense. So I guess what I'm thinking is like, how high up does design go within the operation, and how do you kind of bat away a high up stakeholder by saying, well, no, it's this process that we all trust? Do you know what I mean? Because like, I've been in design processes before where a CEO walks in and goes, don't like that, and everyone kind of flaps around, and this is not applause, this is panic sort of thing. And without the right processes in place prior to that point, you can't go, well, no, it's like this because of X, Y, Z, and that's backed up with, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's no easy answer. There's no silver bullets. If you certainly, so Asda in its current guise where it is now, I would say we've got to change perspective from being a bricks and mortar business, retail business, to starting to embed some digital first, not even user-centered design thinking, get people thinking, customers are coming into store, sure, but they've all got a mobile phone and they're probably an Asda Rewards customer, which is an app, and they may be using Scan and Go, and they might actually be using the self-serve checkout. So they're in the store, but they're having digital interactions, and we just don't think in that way yet. So I think I don't think I can give you a frame of reference for how we're doing things where I am currently, because I think we've got a long road to kind of go with that. And equally, when I've been in more digital native businesses, you still get a senior stakeholder, a CEO comes in with a JFDI, and everybody kind of jumps, don't they? I think there's a culture thing there around educating the senior stakeholder around the process, because invariably they're 2 or 3 steps removed anyway. So I think as designers, we need to be maybe communicating more and speaking the language of business as well about the impact of what we do. I think there's also a cultural thing of empowering the team to not feel like they have to be in that fight or flight mode just because it's come down from on high. How do you manage that respectfully, but how do you kind of go explore it as an opportunity? Don't just dismiss it, but like you know, not have a knee-jerk reaction that you drop everything and you respond. Again, I think some of the where I've lost the battle of wills, it's been, okay, can we test this? Our assumption is this over here. You want to do this over here. We're at odds. We can't find a way through. Can we agree to doing some kind of test? Either that's early stage research and prototyping, and we'll get some feedback. And then again, I've still had that stakeholder who's so blindsided that they kind of hear what we're saying from feedback from users in testing and still getting it to sort of fit their narrative. So again, I don't think if you've got a what's the phrase, an immovable force
Unstoppable object.
Yeah, and it's just a chipping away at it. But yeah, more often than not, I would encourage the teams to fall back on testing and data just to kind of position the perspective on that. Your culture and your process stuff is probably a longer play, isn't it, really? Does that help?
No, it's interesting. I think the suspicion is that there isn't a silver bullet other than culture and trust, really.
Yeah.
And I think it's pragmatism on both sides, isn't it? You know, like nobody is a single expert. It's a sort of collective expertise that drives a successful, you know, company, product, experience, etc.
No. And again, one of my bottomly bingo phrases is designers know nothing yet. And it's the fact that we go out and we find it, and we know, because I think as soon as we fall back into the we know everything, well, we might not be the highest paid person, but we're coming from a place of opinion, and it's the same kind of behaviour, and we need to ensure that we're still maintaining that beginner's mind and openness to exploration and things like that.
There's probably a nicer way of crafting it, but I've always referred to it as like designers are the stupidest person in the room. Because when I was in consultancy, you know, you're a temporary expert in one industry, and then the next month you're working on a different project, and you were in a room full of subject matter experts. So no question is a stupid question, because you've got to get what's in their head into your head so you can design the right solution. So if it sounds like a stupid question, it might be to them, but it isn't to you, because you need to know it and you didn't know it before.
If you want a nicer phrase, I can lend you this one. This is a bit of a Buddhist, I think, quote. It came up from my yoga practice. In the beginner's mind, there are many opportunities. In the experts, there are few.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Grasshopper.
It's very true, though. I often, if I'm facilitating a workshop or something with a group, particularly if it's from a company, I'll quite happily say I am the stupidest person in the room, and I embrace that, because sometimes you need someone to ask those stupid questions, because they're maybe questions that have never been asked before, and they should. And it's only the stupid person who sees them as being a question.
Well, often you get three other people in the back going, "Oh yeah, I was thinking that," and it's like,
Yeah, it's true. Right. Well, thank you all for your questions, and thank you for your fabulous answers, Kimberly and Nick. And once again, thank you for sharing just so many nuggets of goodness. And I'm really